Okay, we're on page 30. This is part 3 of the introductory chapter 0.0, and our heading here is Where's Art? Image 0.0.7, this is the Philadelphia Museum of Art in Pennsylvania. Now in the US, this was the first museum, excuse me, the art museum that we had, and it was originally called the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and it was founded in 1805. The first museum to exist for public viewing, museums as we know them today, was the Louvre in Paris, France, and it had been a palace previous to that, and then Paris had a revolution similar to the American Revolution, and the palace was converted into an art museum. So the way that we look at art, the context of art, has shifted quite a lot. Originally, when we were looking back at works such as Bronzino and other older works, those were made for churches and they were made for people's homes. They were not on public display in the way that a museum exists today. So museums kind of evolved. There's more detail on that in the book. I want to kind of speed this up a little bit to get through this chapter. Um, the other aspect of this is who makes art. Some things are not in a museum. So this is the Watts Towers, is a really beautiful segment of sculpture, sorry, in Watts, California. It's near Southgate and Linwood and Compton, and it's off of the Blue Line now. You can go via train, and it's right near the tracks. And part of the thing about being by the tracks, it always was by the tracks when he was building this back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, is that people would discard crockery off the train. Like, they used to have these dinner services and different things like that um, on the train, and he would just go and pick up bottles and different broken things, and you even see like little cup handles sometimes in this crockery. I've been here a few times. Really inspiring place. This guy was self-made. He was not an artist by training, and that's the point that the book is making. So he just came home every night and climbed up these steel rods. This is sort of rebar, and he bent it himself. Nobody even knows how he did it. There's no welding. He doesn't know how to weld. He just bent this and figured out how to make the structures he saw in his mind. And he's what we call an outsider artist or a naive or folk artist. There's a few different other terms as well, and the book will explore that a bit more. But he's untrained, that's the point. And he came home every night, just started to build this up, laid some concrete here and mortar and push things into it. This is what we would think of as a mosaic, but it's three-dimensional. It's got all this stuff going on. Very beautiful piece. Another artist we're going to look at is on the opposite end of the spectrum, Jeff Koons, who really doesn't touch his work at all. Now, he is a little bit reviving the Renaissance tradition where you have interns and you have apprentices make the work for you, but he kind of takes it a little further. He was a banker, I believe, or a stockbroker, and he decided art was the best way to make money. That was really where he was coming from in the 80s. And he blew up huge, pardon the pun here, because this is looking like an inflated rabbit. This actually doesn't, it isn't an inflated object. It is I think, stainless steel. Some of these are aluminum, I think, too, if I remember correctly. I actually know a couple people who have worked for him and made this work. So he just pops in to the his little mini factory, his little fabrication place, and for a long time it was up in Sun Valley near Burbank. He had it up there, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, he would have these made. He'd just sort of have a drawing or an idea, and then other people would make the work. So, opposite of Simon Rodia, I don't know how trained Koons is. That's actually a good question. I don't really know his background and training, but he basically designed things and had them made, as opposed to wanting to use his hands to make them. Then we get into the different types of art that we have and the context again. This is a tea bowl, and this is something that's this is Japanese and 16th century. And Japanese artists, ceramic artists, are revered as much as, if not more than, painters in Japan. We get into the Renaissance in the Western tradition, in our Western art tradition. The Renaissance breaks things down, and potters become less important in sculpture, painting, and architecture, not in that order. I think sculpture would normally go last. I'm a sculptor, so I tend to cheat on that a little bit. But painting is the be all end all. And everything else falls by the wayside. Now, in the East, in this context, the Japanese tea bowl, um, ceramics is an elevated art form. It's a fine art, it's a big deal. But the other point that the book is making here is that this is contextually a piece that is not shown in a museum necessarily. Now, they are in museums, but the idea is that it's part of a sacred tea ceremony that has to do with Buddhism and Zen. And these tea bowls are an active part of that participation, and everything, including like the spoons and the whisks and the teapot and everything else in the tea ceremony has to reflect the religion and the sense of the style, of imperfection, perfection and imperfection. It's kind of hard to explain, but the idea is that this is a piece that is not really a museum piece in the sense that we think of things. It is an active object. And we're going to contrast that with our Mona Lisa, which is, of course, at the Louvre. If you ever go to see it, go early, or, beat the crowds, because you can't get very close to it. It's very difficult. It's behind plexiglass, and there's just a mob all the time. At any rate, this is a Renaissance, height of the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci. I think we all kind of know that. I don't even have to explain that. It's so famous. But what we're trying to do, what he was trying to do here, is just focus on, um, the human soul, and he really captures this with her. We have this strange landscape in the back. We don't really know where she is exactly. It's kind of dreamy, but it's really her gaze that seems to get us, and her smile. And we revere painting. We think of that as an important object, and this, of course, is now in a museum, but it wasn't originally intended for that. It was originally to create a likeness for a merchant in Florence. But again, this gets argued all the time. Who is she really? We don't exactly know, and we don't even know if the model was actually the woman itself. But painting versus ceramic versus